They mocked the deaf boy at the auction for trying to bid on a furious bull, but the laughter stopped when the bull walked straight to him. What happens next will leave you speechless. The ground trembled beneath the weight of Iron Fang's hooves as he was led into the auction ring. The handlers tugged on the thick ropes tied to his halter, their muscles straining, but the bull moved only when he wished. His dark coat glistened with sweat under the midday sun, and his eyes, black and sharp, scanned the crowd like those of a predator. Men leaned over the wooden rails, shouting, waving their hands, and jostling to see him, each eager to outbid the other. Marshal Greaves, the auctioneer, lifted his gavel and thundered, "Here he is, gentlemen! The beast you've been waiting for! The untamed pride of Harrow's Edge, Iron Fang!" His voice boomed across the arena, followed by the rising chorus of bids. But in the middle of the frenzy, the bull suddenly stopped. His head swung side to side, muscles rippling under his skin as he scraped his hoof against the dirt. The handlers cursed under their breath and pulled harder, but Iron Fang refused to move. A tense ripple went through the audience. Some men laughed nervously, others muttered that the animal was about to charge. Marshal Greaves tried to shout over the unease, his words quick and hurried. "Stay calm, folks! Stay calm! He's worth every coin you've got!" But his confident grin faltered when the bull snorted, sending up a spray of dust, and then turned his gaze away from the handlers, away from the crowd, to the edge of the ring. There, standing quietly near the wooden rail, was Eli Danner. The boy had not shouted a bid, had not jostled for a better view. He had simply stood still, his thin frame pressed against the railing, his eyes calm but fixed on the massive animal. Eli was 16, though smaller than most boys his age, his silence setting him apart in a town where every man's voice was measured by how loud it could echo across the saloon. He could not hear the crowd's laughter, the jeers that already rolled through the air at his expense, but he felt them in the way shoulders shook and fingers pointed in his direction. Men leaned toward each other, smirking. One made an exaggerated gesture, covering his ears and opening his mouth in a cruel pantomime. Another whispered something to his friend, who burst into laughter, nudging the boy beside him. Eli ignored them. His dark eyes, steady and unblinking, stayed locked on Iron Fang. The bull's breath came in deep, heavy snorts, its massive chest rising and falling, but instead of stamping toward the nearest threat, Iron Fang began to move forward, slowly, deliberately, step by step, toward the rail where Eli stood. "Watch out, boy!" a rancher shouted, his voice breaking with both alarm and mockery. "He'll crush you flat!" Another man laughed. "Stand back, mute! You won't hear him coming!" The handlers tried to drag Iron Fang back, pulling with all their weight, but the bull ripped the ropes free with a violent jerk. Marshal Greaves' gavel hung frozen in his hand as his booming voice failed him. The arena fell into a tense hush, broken only by the thud of hooves striking the packed dirt. Every step shook the ground, every breath of the bull sent dust swirling in the air. Eli did not move. His body was still, but inside, his heart pounded hard enough to rattle his chest. He had never stood so close to such a creature, never felt its sheer size tower over him, but he remembered his father's words as clearly as if they had been spoken that morning. Strength was not in how loud a man shouted, but in how deeply he could be understood without words. He let that thought steady him. His small hands gripped the rail for a moment, then relaxed. The crowd's laughter turned to nervous murmurs. "He's mad," someone whispered. "That bull will kill him." But when Iron Fang reached him, the expected fury never came. The beast lowered his massive head, his horns glinting in the sunlight, and stopped just inches from Eli. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Dust hung in the air, motionless. Then Iron Fang bowed his head lower still, so that his nose nearly touched the boy's chest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "What in blazes?" Marshal Greaves muttered under his breath, unable to finish the sentence. Eli lifted his hand slowly, his fingers trembling despite the calm mask on his face. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath, waiting for the bull to gore him the moment he touched it. But when Eli's palm pressed gently against the rough skin of Iron Fang's forehead, the animal let out a deep, rumbling snort, not of anger, but of something closer to release, like a hound returning to its master after a long hunt. The silence in the arena was deafening. Even the men who had laughed hardest at Eli only hours before now stared, wide-eyed and pale. No one spoke. No one could explain what they were seeing. Marshal Greaves cleared his throat and tried to recover the rhythm of the auction. Well, there you have it, gentlemen. Strong as steel and calm as a lamb in the right hands, eh? Who'll start the bidding at 200? But his words sounded hollow, drowned out by the sight before everyone's eyes. Iron Fang had ignored every rope, every handler's shout, every command of wealth and authority in that ring. Yet here he stood, submitting to the quiet touch of a deaf boy. Eli's hand lingered on the bull's head. He could feel the raw power beneath the skin, the muscles like coiled rope, the dangerous strength that no man in the arena could truly control. Yet in that moment, he also felt trust. A bond had been formed, unspoken and unseen, and it silenced every cruel whisper that had trailed him since childhood. He lifted his chin slightly, meeting the eyes of the men who had mocked him. Their smirks were gone. Iron Fang shifted his weight, snorted once more, and then stood still beside him, like a sentinel waiting for command. The silence broke into a wave of voices, some fearful, some amazed, others scrambling to make sense of what had just happened. "It's a trick!" one man shouted, his voice high and uncertain. "Some kind of trick," another muttered. "Never seen anything like it in my life." Marshal Greaves slammed his gavel against the block, desperate to regain control. "Order! Keep order in this ring!" But even he could not deny the truth. The most feared bull in Harrow's Edge had chosen its master, and it was not any of the ranchers, traders, or men of coin who filled the stands. It was the boy they had laughed at. Eli stood in silence, his hand steady against the beast's forehead, his eyes unwavering. For the first time, the crowd did not see weakness in him. They saw something else, something they could not name, but something that unsettled them all the same. The mocking laughter stopped cold, replaced with disbelief. None could understand why the most dangerous animal in the auction had chosen a deaf boy over seasoned ranchers. What the crowd didn't know was that this moment was only the beginning. Iron Fang's choice was about to upend every man's plan in Harrow's Edge. Chaos erupted the instant Iron Fang lowered his head before Eli. The silence that had gripped the arena broke into shouts, disbelief, and frantic arguments. Some men pushed closer to the rails, jabbing their fingers toward the boy, their eyes wide with suspicion. Others shook their heads, muttering about omens and curses. Marshal Greaves slammed his gavel against the podium, his thick mustache twitching with unease as he tried to steady his voice. "Stay calm, gentlemen. Stay calm. Just a rare moment of chance. Nothing more than that." His words carried a false confidence, a desperate attempt to turn chaos back into order. But the ripple of whispers told another story. "He bewitched it," one man hissed, his tone sharp with fear. "Can't be natural," another growled, adjusting his hat nervously. "A boy with no voice commanding a beast like that?" "Nonsense," a third sneered, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's a fluke. Bulls are beasts, nothing more." Through it all, Eli remained still, his hand resting firmly on Iron Fang's broad forehead. He felt the bull's heat beneath his palm, the steady thrum of power restrained not by rope or whip, but by trust. He said nothing. He could not. But his silence was louder than any man's roar in that moment. His eyes, calm and unyielding, told a story that no jeer could erase. He was not afraid. From the opposite side of the arena, a booming laugh cut through the noise. "Enough of this nonsense!" The voice belonged to Conrad Vale, the wealthiest rancher in Harrow's Edge. Broad-shouldered and tall, dressed in a tailored coat finer than anything the other men wore, Conrad carried himself with the air of a man who expected the world to bend to him. His boots crunched across the dirt as he strode forward, his wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over eyes that glimmered with arrogance. "Marshal Greaves," Conrad announced, his voice carrying easily over the restless crowd. "Let's put this circus to rest. I'll buy Iron Fang, no matter the cost." A hush swept through the ring. Conrad's reputation was well known. He was not only wealthy but ruthless, a man who never lost when his pride was at stake. His declaration silenced every would-be bidder, for none dared to match his purse. Marshal Greaves seized the lifeline eagerly, thundering, "Well said, Mr. Vale. We have a generous offer. Who will bid against him?" But no voices rose. Conrad's word was final. The handlers moved quickly, tugging hard on Iron Fang's ropes, trying to pull the beast toward Conrad. But the bull resisted. He planted his hooves firmly, muscles straining like steel cables, and swung his massive head violently enough to drag the men sideways. Dust sprayed up as the handlers stumbled. One cried out, nearly falling beneath the bull's hooves. Iron Fang let out a guttural bellow, his rage shaking the arena. Conrad's smirk deepened. He turned, pointing a gloved finger at Eli. "It's a trick," he declared, his voice sharp and mocking. His lip curled as he exaggerated the gesture of covering his ears, a cruel reminder of Eli's silence. "Your pet obeys you, does it not? Let's see him obey you again." The words hung heavy, cruel in their intent. Some men chuckled at the jab, but even those who laughed wore nervous expressions, their eyes flicking between the boy and the bull. Marshal Greaves hesitated. "Mr. Vale," he began, but Conrad cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Release him," Conrad ordered the handlers. His tone left no room for disobedience. "Let us see the truth." The handlers exchanged uneasy glances, but Conrad's wealth carried more weight than their doubt. Reluctantly, they untied the ropes, slipping them free from Iron Fang's halter. The moment they stepped back, the bull swung his head with a fury that scattered dust and straw into the air. The crowd gasped, bracing for him to lunge at the silent boy. But Iron Fang's eyes did not lock on Eli. They turned, burning with fury, toward Conrad. The bull charged. The ground shook as Iron Fang thundered forward, horns lowered. The crowd screamed, men stumbling backward in terror. Conrad's smirk vanished in an instant. He stumbled as he tried to retreat, tripping over a barrel near the fence. He fell hard onto the dirt, scrambling with his boots as Iron Fang's horns missed him by inches, smashing into the wooden post behind him. The post cracked and splintered, the sound sharp as gunfire. Dust and wood chips sprayed into the air. Conrad rolled away, his fine coat streaked with dirt, his face pale with shock. He had been seconds from being gored. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted in horror, others laughed nervously at the humiliation. "Did you see that?" one man yelled. "Iron Fang tried to gut him." Eli's eyes widened as he saw the bull pawing the ground, preparing to charge again. Without thinking, he stepped forward. He raised both hands, palms open, moving them slowly in the air. His breathing steadied, though his chest thudded with fear. Iron Fang's head jerked, but then, against all expectation, he stopped. The bull's chest rose and fell heavily as he glared at Conrad, but he did not move forward again. The arena froze. Every eye turned to Eli, who now stood with his arms still raised, his body a calm presence between beast and man. Conrad pushed himself to his feet, his breath ragged, fury etched across his face. His pride burned hotter than his fear. "This is madness!" he bellowed, his voice hoarse with anger. He jabbed a finger at Eli. "The boy is dangerous! Marshal Greaves, I demand you declare this auction invalid! That animal isn't tamed! He's cursed!" Marshal Greaves looked conflicted. His gavel hovered above the podium, his eyes darting between the raging rancher, the silent boy, and the bull that now stood perfectly still at Eli's unspoken command. The crowd murmured in low voices, torn between fear and awe. "Maybe the boy's got a gift," one man whispered. "A gift? Or a curse?" another shot back. "Doesn't matter what you call it," said a third, his voice trembling. "That bull listens to him, and no one else." The irony settled over the arena like a shadow. Eli, the boy mocked as weak and useless, had become the one man the fiercest bull obeyed. The ranchers who once sneered now whispered with unease, their eyes filled not with ridicule but with something closer to respect and fear. Conrad's face reddened with rage. His pride, sharper than any horn, refused to bow before the boy's silence. He straightened his coat, dusted his sleeves, and fixed Eli with a glare that carried the weight of a promise. His voice was low but sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. "This isn't over," Conrad growled. His eyes narrowed, gleaming with malice. "I will have that bull. One way or another." Eli said nothing, but his steady gaze did not waver. His hand remained on Iron Fang's flank, the boy and beast standing together as if carved from the same stone. The whispers swelled again, voices rising with speculation. But one truth was undeniable. Conrad Vale had been humiliated, and he would not forget it. Foreshadowing crept into the moment like a shadow across the dust. Every man present sensed it, that Conrad's fury would not end here, that the boy's bond with the bull had lit a fire in a man too proud to lose. Behind Conrad's narrowed eyes, a plan was already forming, a plan that would test Eli's courage in ways far more dangerous than an auction stage. Night pressed down heavy over Harrow's Edge, the kind of stillness that seemed to hold its breath after a storm. Eli sat by the small corral behind his house, his thin frame leaning against the weathered fence. His thoughts lingered on the day's chaos, the crowd's whispers, and Conrad Vale's glare burning like a brand in his memory. Beside him, Iron Fang shifted restlessly, his massive body blotting out the stars whenever he moved. The bull's breaths were steady, but his ears twitched, and his hooves scraped the dirt in short, sharp bursts. Eli could not hear the sound, but he felt it. The tremors in the ground, the rhythm in the air that told him the bull was uneasy. He lifted a hand, brushing it against Iron Fang's coarse hide. The beast stilled, lowering his head slightly as though to acknowledge the boy's silent reassurance. Yet Iron Fang's unease did not fade, and soon Eli understood why. A faint glow flickered at the edge of the fields, lantern light moving unnaturally, not carried by neighbors but creeping toward him in secret. Conrad's men emerged from the darkness like wolves, their faces shadowed by wide-brimmed hats. They carried ropes coiled around their shoulders, and in their fists, torches whose flames licked upward with hunger. There were 5 of them, hired hands more loyal to coin than conscience. They moved with the stealth of hunters, circling the corral. One spat into the dirt and whispered to the others, "Quick and quiet. Vale wants the bull. Don't let the boy scare you." Iron Fang's muscles bunched. He pawed the ground and let out a deep snort that shook the fence. Eli straightened instantly, his eyes narrowing, He could not hear the men's boots crunching across the earth, but he felt the vibration beneath his feet, each step bringing danger closer. His heart pounded, though his body did not waver. He stepped forward, placing himself between Iron Fang and the shadows that crept nearer. The men lunged. Ropes snapped forward, looping for Iron Fang's legs. The bull erupted with a roar that shattered the night, throwing two of the men aside with a violent sweep of his horns. They flew through the air like rag dolls, hitting the ground with cries of pain. The other three tried to press closer, but Iron Fang's power was relentless. He swung his massive head, scattering them backward, his hooves stomping the ground like thunder. Eli's chest tightened with fear, not for himself, but for Iron Fang. The boy dashed forward, arms spread wide, placing his body directly between the bull and the men. His silhouette cut against the torchlight, small, fragile, yet unflinching. The hired hands froze. It was not the bull that startled them most, but the boy's defiance. He did not cower, did not run. His wide eyes glimmered with something more than courage. They carried a warning. Iron Fang halted at once, his rage checked as though Eli's presence had drawn a line even the beast would not cross. The bull's sides heaved, his nostrils flaring smoke, but he stayed rooted behind Eli, awaiting the boy's decision. The men hesitated, their courage faltering. One muttered nervously, "This ain't natural." Another swallowed hard, his knuckles white around his rope. The torches flickered, casting long, wavering shadows across the corral. The sound of hooves shattered the standoff. Conrad Vale rode into the scene on horseback, his coat flowing behind him, his face twisted in fury. The firelight painted sharp angles across his features, his eyes blazing with malice. He yanked his horse to a halt, glaring at the chaos before him. "Cowards!" he roared, his voice splitting the silence. "What are you waiting for? Take the beast!" His words cut like a whip, but the men shifted uneasily, their confidence drained by the bull's defiance and the boy's courage. Ronfang fixed his glare on Conrad, his massive head lowered, horns gleaming in the firelight. Even the horse beneath Conrad shifted nervously, ears flicking back, unwilling to move closer. For the first time, the powerful rancher looked uncertain, but his pride refused to let him retreat. Eli stepped forward, placing his hand firmly on Iron Fang's flank. His touch was calm, steady, and his presence seemed to anchor the bull. Slowly, he guided Iron Fang backward, away from the circle of torches. His eyes never left Conrad's, and though Eli spoke no words, his silence carried a weight heavier than any threat. It said, "You cannot have him." The air was thick with irony. Conrad, the man with wealth and power, stood powerless before the boy he had mocked. The sight of Eli's calm, unflinching stance made Conrad's teeth grind. His fury only deepened, twisting his pride into something darker. Then Conrad's voice cut through the night, cold and sharp. "If I can't take the bull, then I'll take what the boy treasures." He snapped his fingers. One of his men, face lit with cruelty, hurled a torch into Eli's wooden barn. The dry planks caught instantly. Flames roared upward, red and gold against the night sky. Sparks leapt like fireflies as smoke poured into the air. The barn, small but precious, held the last remnants of Eli's father, tools, harnesses, and keepsakes that carried his memory. The heat surged outward in waves, the fire spreading quickly. Neighbors stirred from their homes, lanterns appearing in the distance as voices rose with alarm. Yet the choice before Eli was cruel and immediate. The bull stood behind him, loyal and waiting. The barn burned ahead, swallowing what little of his family's legacy remained. His throat tightened as the firelight reflected in his eyes, but he did not retreat. Instead, Eli did what no one expected. He placed his hand firmly against Iron Fang's shoulder and led him forward, into the fire. The crowd that had gathered gasped in disbelief. "He's mad!" someone shouted. "He'll burn alive!" But Eli did not falter. He guided Iron Fang with steady steps, his small frame dwarfed by the beast beside him. Together they entered the smoke, the boy pulling down burning planks with his bare hands to clear a path for the bull. Sparks seared his skin, and smoke clawed at his lungs, but he pressed on, refusing to abandon the creature that had trusted him. Iron Fang followed without hesitation, his body tense but obedient. The fire crackled around them, beams collapsing, embers raining down, yet the bond between boy and bull remained unbroken. When at last they stumbled out the other side, coughing and coated in ash, the crowd erupted with astonishment. Neighbors who had once doubted Eli now stared in awe, their disbelief melting into respect. The boy and the beast stood alive, side by side, framed by smoke and flame like figures out of legend. Conrad's men shrank back, their torches lowered, their resolve shattered. Even they could not deny what they had witnessed. Conrad himself sat frozen on his horse, his face pale but his eyes burning with a dangerous gleam. His plan to break the boy had instead made him into something greater, a symbol of courage and loyalty that no wealth could buy. The fire roared behind them, the night filled with the crackle of burning wood and the murmurs of neighbors who now spoke Eli's name with reverence. Conrad gritted his teeth, rage twisting every line of his face. He yanked the reins of his horse, retreating into the shadows, but not in defeat. For even as he turned away, his eyes glimmered with one last dangerous thought. The square of Harrow's Edge was alive with murmurs as the morning sun climbed over the rooftops. Men leaned against posts, women peered from doorways, and boys clambered onto barrels to get a better view. The previous night's fire still hung heavy in their minds, its smoke long gone, but its memory smoldering in whispers. At the center stood Marshal Greaves, his broad shoulders squared, his hand resting on the polished handle of his badge. His voice carried over the crowd as he raised a hand for silence. "No man here," the marshal declared firmly, "can ignore what was witnessed. A beast of Ironfang's strength cannot be owned by coin alone. That bull has chosen his master, and no auction, no law, can overrule the will of such a creature." The words rippled through the gathering. Fathers exchanged glances, nudging their sons as if to remind them that there was more to respect than wealth. Old ranch hands nodded grimly, some ashamed for having laughed at the boy the day before. Children gazed with wide eyes at Eli, who stood quietly beside Ironfang at the edge of the square. His clothes were still smudged with soot, his hair singed in places, but his back was straight and his gaze steady. He did not smile, nor did he bask in the attention. He stood with the same quiet resolve he always carried, the kind born not of pride but of survival. The marshal turned, his weathered face softening as he looked at the boy. "Eli Barrett," he said, his voice steady, "the bull is yours. By right of loyalty, by proof of courage, and by the witness of every man here." A hush fell over the square, followed by the slow swell of applause. Some clapped hesitantly, still stunned by what they had seen the night before, but soon the square filled with cheers. Men who once mocked him now watched with admiration, and even those who had turned away from him before could not deny the sight of boy and bull standing side by side, unbroken. But the moment was shattered by the sharp clatter of boots against cobblestone. Conrad Vale strode into the square, his face a mask of rage. His coat swung behind him like a banner of defiance, and his eyes burned with the stubborn pride of a man who refused to yield. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the muttered protests, until he stood before Eli and the marshal. "This is not finished," Conrad snarled, his voice cutting through the cheers like a blade. His gaze locked on Eli, sharp and venomous. "A bull may follow him, but that does not prove the boy is worthy. Anyone can stand behind an animal's strength. Let him prove it." The marshal's jaw tightened. "Conrad, the boy has proved more than most men here would dare. You'd do best to leave with your pride intact." But Conrad only laughed, a bitter sound. He stepped forward, his boots striking hard against the stone. "If Ironfang truly obeys him, then let the boy ride him. Not through the square, not across some field, but through the ravine." He turned, pointing toward the jagged cliffs that loomed beyond the town. "Let him guide the bull through those cliffs, where the ground crumbles beneath your feet and the river below swallows men whole. If he makes it through, I'll hold my tongue. If not—" He let the words hang, a cruel smirk tugging at his lips. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The ravine was no simple path. It was a place feared by seasoned riders, where narrow ledges gave way to rushing waters below. Many shook their heads, muttering that the test was madness, a trap disguised as a challenge. The marshal's brow furrowed. "That's a death sentence, and you know it." Conrad folded his arms. "It's the only way to prove the boy's claim. Unless, of course, he's afraid." The words stung the air. All eyes turned to Eli. For a moment the boy stood silent, his gaze fixed on the ground. He felt the weight of their stares, the expectation pressing against his chest. He thought of the fire the night before, of the ropes, the laughter, the endless years of mockery. Then he looked up, his expression calm and unshaken. Eli nodded once. Without a word, he stepped toward Ironfang, gripping the bull's thick hide and swinging himself onto its back. The bull shifted but did not resist, lowering his head as if to brace for the journey ahead. The square fell silent. Even Conrad's smirk faltered for an instant as he realized the boy had accepted without hesitation. The crowd followed, a wave of anxious bodies trailing behind as Eli and Ironfang made their way to the edge of the ravine. The cliffs rose like jagged teeth, the sound of the river below echoing faintly. Dust swirled in the dry wind, carrying with it the scent of stone and danger. Conrad leaned against a boulder, his arms crossed, watching with the cold confidence of a man certain he would win. "Let's see how far he gets," he muttered. Eli tightened his grip, pressing his knees gently against Ironfang's sides. The bull stepped forward, his hooves crunching against the gravel. The descent began. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for the bull's massive frame. Loose rocks tumbled into the abyss below with every step. Eli's heart pounded, but his hands moved with certainty, guiding Iron Fang with soft touches and steady balance. The bull obeyed, moving with a grace that seemed unnatural for his size. Conrad smirked, waiting for the slip that would surely come. But it did not. Iron Fang placed each hoof with precision, his body swaying with perfect rhythm, as if he knew the danger and trusted only Eli to guide him through it. Halfway down, a ledge crumbled beneath them. Gasps erupted from the crowd above. Eli leaned forward, urging Iron Fang onward. The bull surged, muscles rippling, carrying them both across the break before the stones could drag them down. Dust billowed, but when it cleared, the boy and beast still stood unbroken. "Impossible," one of Conrad's men whispered, his face pale. The path twisted, narrowing further. The roar of the river grew louder, crashing against the rocks below. Eli's lungs burned, every muscle tense, but he kept his movements calm. His silence became his strength. No shouts, no panicked cries, only trust between him and the bull. Finally, the cliffs widened. Iron Fang climbed the last stretch, his horns catching the light of the sun as they emerged on the far side. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the crowd erupted in cheers, voices thundering across the ravine. Eli sat tall on Iron Fang's back, ash still clinging to his clothes, dust clouding his hair, but his eyes steady. He had not conquered the ravine with brute strength, but with trust and quiet courage. Conrad's face twisted, his smirk gone, his pride crumbling. He turned away, his shoulders stiff, retreating through the crowd that no longer looked at him with respect, but with disdain. The man who once commanded fear now carried only disgrace. The people surged around Eli. Their admiration no longer whispered but shouted. Fathers lifted their sons to see him, boys pointed with wide-eyed wonder, and men who once mocked him now tipped their hats in respect. Yet Eli did not bask in the glory. He slid from Iron Fang's back, placing a steady hand against the bull's side, his expression calm. In the days that followed, Eli and Iron Fang became inseparable. They walked the streets of Harrow's Edge side by side, no longer mocked but admired. Men who had once laughed at his silence now sought his advice, and boys who had once jeered now tried to imitate his courage. The bond between boy and bull had reshaped the town, turning ridicule into respect. But Eli never sought glory. He did not strut, nor boast, nor claim himself a hero. He simply walked with quiet dignity, Iron Fang always at his side. Together they were a living reminder that true power lies not in words or wealth, but in the bond of trust that no man can buy. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores powerful themes of empathy, unexpected connections, and the profound bonds that can form between those who are often overlooked by society. This narrative aims to highlight that true understanding transcends language and that compassion can be found in the most unlikely of places.